In the chamber this week, we follow a pair of mobile rogues with a mysterious ending. We become everyone's favorite caped crusader. And finally, we talk about the ways to make magic in your world unique and interesting. Is it illegal? Is it dangerous? How does magic impact your world? Plus, the time is now. It is your time to join us in the wackiness. Just kidding, we record this before you listen. But please feel free to join the wackiness on our social media. Details to be presented later. All this and more on Fandom Roulette. Hey everyone, welcome to Fandom Roulette. This is Joe.
And I'm Cody.
And on Fandom Roulette, this is a podcast where we talk about a myriad of things, including history, video games, role-playing games, and anything else that we might have encountered in the past week of nerdiness. So, Cody, what are some nerdy stuff that you've been up to this week?
Nerdy stuff?
Yeah.
I've been a super big nerd and working on campaign stuff for my only campaign that I'm running right now.
What?
Right? I'm only doing one now instead of two since the 6 is kind of done, and I'm waiting for you guys to get your shit together. And...
Yeah, we just have to do our epilogue episode thing.
Yeah, once we do the epilogue episode, I think we're gonna... I hope we don't take a hiatus, but I would like to do like one-shots and things like that until we figure out what we want.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're also getting close to December, which is like when I kind of like disappear for a little bit, but...
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
It is that time of the year.
But I mean, since we're moving away from like no, never mind. Too semantics.
So, yeah.
But
yeah, besides that, mostly D&D / podcast stuff. I'll talk
Fair
about
enough.
it later. What nerdy stuff have you been up to?
You know, the usual thing that I usually say, like watching television. I actually finished the first season of Dragon Prince, which I think I mentioned before on the show.
Cool.
Which was like it was good. I'll probably watch season 2 when it comes out. Like it's I don't know if it's necessarily must watch TV for me, but I enjoyed it enough. The animation style was still always kind of clunky and weird to me, but hey, that's their decision. So, and then the other thing is I read Murder on the Orient Express, which was a nice little mystery that I read pretty quick. I read it in a couple of days if I didn't have to take breaks for like work and stuff. But it was a fun little book. So
very cool.
Yeah. Here's the secret, Cody.
The butler did it.
Damn it, I knew it.
That's not actually true. It's
Old man Jenkins, he would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for those pesky kids and their dog.
For that pesky little Dutch detective with the dope mustache.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, I'm just gonna like slide right into the history section.
Yeah.
So on this season of the podcast, I've been talking about famous rogues. And so
what?
you know, I know, right? It's been shocking to me. But so this week, so anyway, rogues, you know, have always kind of been interesting to me just because I've been kind of curious about that various aspect of like villainy, but like, you know, villainy in a sense where they become kind of popular or almost folklore's heroics. It was actually interesting. I heard an interesting thing earlier today, which was regarding movies about bank robbers. How, like, you know, bank robbers are often not presented as like super duper villainous because bank robbing is not necessarily like it's a different kind of crime because it sometimes feels victimless, if that makes sense.
Yeah, except for all the people in the bank. And
I mean,
you know.
sure. But, like, yeah, I mean, I think the point was more along the lines of it's like, you know, with other kinds of movie, like, you know, with other kinds of, you know, crime or criminals or things like that, like, people are getting, like, physical. Well, and that's the thing, too, is there's always a point in the bank robbing movie where everything goes bad, right?
Right.
And then that's when everything starts to unravel and fall apart, and then you stop rooting for the guys. But
Sure.
You know, there's something about like the rogues where it's like there's almost always like an element of, oh, they kind of ended up weirdly leading a revolution, or they became popular because they were giving back to their community, or they were just kind of generally sticking it to the man, and everyone thought that was pretty cool. So this week we're talking about
Han Solo.
Yep.
Yes.
So anyways, Cody, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. We're gonna be on this planet, and the planet is named. It starts with the C for sure.
Okay, cool.
And then we see this guy, and he's like running, and he's holding on to some like space fuel.
Right.
I'm just gonna do a shot for shot retelling of Solo as best as I can remember it.
Oh, maybe we should save that for a very special episode.
A very special episode of it's gonna be great because I'm gonna do all kinds of tangents about why I love every aspect of that movie because it's my favorite Star Wars movies.
I probably should also watch the movie before you retell it so that I can understand what you're saying. Or
sure, and I'll probably rewatch it too so I can remember like the new. But anyways,
no. You have to. You can't rewatch it. I gotta watch it. I want you to from your current memory.
Okay, but anyway. So this week we're talking about a gentleman named Robert Leroy Parker. That was a boring name, right?
Except if you change his first name to Peter, then you got yourself a Marvel superhero.
A superhero? Well, no, he's actually better known as Butch Cassidy.
Oh, shit.
Who was a notorious train robber and bank robber, and the leader of a gang of criminal outlaws known as the Wild Bunch.
Wow. The Wild Bunch.
Yeah, which I think there's been at least one movie made about them, and there's another movie coming up. But anyways...
Can we talk for a second about how the Wild Bunch is like one of the most tame bandit group names I've ever heard in my life?
I mean, yeah, it's not the most exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like we are the Banana Bandits. Like, what?
The Cheeto Bandito. No, it's the Frito Bandito. Damn it, Joe.
You blew it. You blew it.
Cut the whole thing out. We're all starting over.
Yeah, we got to start over. Guys, welcome back to Fandom Roulette.
Hi, welcome to history. But anyways, so like a lot of people, Mr. Parker, who changed his name to Butch Cassidy, started off with a fairly simple beginning. So he was born in the city of Beaver, Utah, and he was the first of 13 children of British immigrant Maximilian Parker and Anne Campbell's Gillis. So his parents rolled very high on the number of siblings table.
Nice. That was the most appropriate way to say that they got to boning.
Yeah, well, they were Mormon, so.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. Both of his parents were Mormon, and they both families moved to Utah, and the families were basically the mother and father married in July of 1865, and then he grew up on his parents' ranch. This is a place called Circleville, Utah, which is quite a ways south of Salt Lake City. But anyways, Cassidy's first crime offense was minor. In 1880, he went to a clothier shop and he found the shop closed. So he entered the shop, stole some jeans and some pie, and he left an IOU promising to pay on his next visit, but they were not very happy with that. However, he was acquitted by a jury, probably because he left an IOU. He was very polite about it.
Man, that was the most polite robbery ever. It's like,
right?
All right, guys, I'm gonna take this from you, but I'll get you back. I'll get you back.
Things get a little darker, though, because starting in 1884, he started to seek work as a rancher, but he possibly started delivering stolen horses to buyers. So that's the way to get
what
started.
A step up,
right? Yeah. And then within 5 years, he started to rob banks. So,
wow, that was so drastic.
I know, right? Well, he met a guy named Matt Warner. And then they would race horses at various events, and they would divide the winnings between them. But yeah, in 1889, Warner and then these two gentlemen called the McCarty brothers started robbing banks, stealing approximately $21,000, which is today the equivalent of $572,000.
Okay.
And so basically, in 1890. Cassidy purchased a ranch in Wyoming, which kind of gave them some popular hideouts for gangs during this area because they had some natural geological formations like holes in the wall. So it's possible that Cassidy's ranching, which was never super successful, was just a facade for clandestine activities with other outlaws. So, basically he was letting people come and stay, which, does also fall into our kind of running narrative about outlaws, which is that they knew the terrain better than a lot of people, and so they took advantage of it to create protection and hideouts for one another.
Very cool.
I know, right? And so in 1896, Cassidy started having a broad circle of criminals, and they assembled after some time, which they called themselves the Wild Bunch, and the Wild Bunch was famous for a lot of things, including robbing passenger trains, which, during this time was pretty difficult. You had to remove tracks and things like that. I've actually started thinking about maybe next season talking a little bit about heists and things like that, because I've read about some fun ones in preparation.
Oh man,
this.
that sounds like the best season. I want everything about this.
I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah.
And then in 1899, basically the gang was involved in a train robbery near New Mexico, which Cassidy might have planned and personally directed. There was a shootout which killed, during which his best friend Lay killed Sheriff Edward Farr and Henry Love, and Lay was convicted of murder and sentenced to life of imprisonment. And the Wild Bunch would continue to try robberies, but over a while they started falling apart. Now, over time, these gentlemen became very, very notorious. They had big bounties on their heads from the Pickering Detective Agency, which was in many ways like a precursor to the FBI and things like that. These were it was like an organization of police officers that they weren't necessarily bound to one state or one set of laws, so they could pursue them over multiple states and counties and things like that. So basically he was starting to get scared. So in 1901, he and his friend Longabaugh, who is better known today as the Sundance Kid, decided that they were going to go to Buenos Aires, Argentina. So in 1905, they went to Buenos Aires, Argentina, and they started holding up banks in Argentina because, hey, you can't just change who you are, right?
Wow.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, you just can't change. There's no turning back from a life of crime. Do you realize how bad that sounds?
Yeah, I mean, I do. Whatever.
I understand it was all a joke, but holy shit, that would suck.
I know, right? That also goes against my whole thing. But anyways, and so basically, they started fearing that law enforcement had located them in Argentina. So they sold the ranch that they had bought in Argentina and moved down to Bolivia. And then now here's the thing. So in 1908, near San Vicente in southern Bolivia, a courier was robbed. So companies for payrolls, which was worth about 15,000 Bolivian pesos. And they believed that the people who stole them were Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And then 3 days later, a pair of Americans suspected of being the bandits were seen in the small mining town of San Vicente, where they were in a small boarding house owned by a local miner. So they alerted the authorities, and on the evening of November 6th, the Logic House was surrounded by soldiers, the police chief, the local mayors, and some of his officials who intended to arrest the robbers. Basically, the bandits started opening fire. They actually did kill one of the soldiers. A gunfight ensued, and then the mayor heard a man scream inside the house. Basically, the best thought was that they were shot and killed, and they were buried in a small grave outside of the San Vicente Cemetery. But here's the thing.
Tell me.
in 2017, a search was launched for the grave of Cassidy. They zeroed in on a mound outside of Good Springs. Basically, they were starting to do DNA evidence, but the DNA of his nephew, great nephew at this point, did not match the DNA provided. So, did Butch Cassidy live?
Was that even Butch Cassidy to begin with?
We're not sure. So yeah, I mean, so the thing was during like I said, kind of near the end, Butch Cassidy, it was all they knew was it was a pair of American robbers. So maybe people just assumed that they were Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid because they knew that they were running south. Who knows? Maybe they never ended up in Bolivia. All I know is that one of the things about the story is I don't know why, I kind of like love the fact that they just kind of like pulled up their stuff and just decided, hey, let's go move to Argentina. Why not? And so they started moving down south. Now, of course, these two are in my opinion, I enjoy this movie quite a lot. The great movie Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, which also presents the kind of ambiguous ending because it shows them running into the middle of a kind of like patio area, and it doesn't actually end with them dying or anything like that. So the movie suggests that they were in Bolivia, but who knows? They might not have been. ? But I mean, at this point, they're very clearly probably dead.
Yeah.
But anyways, do you have any questions for me?
About how long did the Wild Bunch actually, like, roam about?
Sure. So the Wild Bunch formed in 1896, and then about 1900 to 1901, you start seeing them kind of slowly falling apart. So in 1901, when they decided to start moving down south, at that point the Wild Bunch was basically done, and it was just Butch Cassidy, his friend Lana Baugh, and actually Lana Baugh's fiance Etta Place, who was a teacher, if memory serves.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. So yeah, at least she was in the movie. So
that's
yeah.
fair.
So that is Butch Cassidy, one of the most notorious criminals in the Old West, whose ending is a big old question mark. Did he get caught? Did he get stopped? The world may never know.
Amazing.
That's my take, because I actually have no way of knowing. The only thing I know is that they were it was a pair of American robbers living in Bolivia. So
nice.
And that's history.
Womp womp.
Nice. I like it. So
I feel like that's how it usually goes, though. It's usually like,
I mean,
yeah, it was really cool, and then it ended real bad.
I mean, that's
Rogues in general, I guess.
That's Rogues in general, yeah. That honestly, like, sadly, that's a lot of like social history.
Oh, yeah, fair enough.
But anyways,
yeah. So, who did you bring into the studio today? I'm gonna lean in on this bit. These people are real. They are definitely not Joe Winku.
No, not at all. Oh man, who's that guy? That little orange guy with the big nose. Oh hey, Cubert, what's up? Oh, Cubert, watch your mouth, sir.
That is the most accurate rendition of Cubert I've ever heard.
Thanks. I've been working on it.
It's almost as if he's actually there, just swearing at us in whatever language he speaks.
I believe it's Cubertese.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That checks.
Is that actually what he sounds like?
I mean, he just sounds like a bunch of warbles and, like, buzzes.
Okay, so I was doing an okay job, actually.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. I'm gonna pat myself on the
I
back.
mean, we're
for that
definitely going to have to, like, double check later, but I'm pretty sure he's just,
Sure.
like, warbles and buzzes.
And if you didn't sound like that, I sounded like whatever character does sound like that. So
Yeah, there's some, like, weird connection I have to that thought. So I hope that's Cubert.
So anyway, so he's holding up a sign now which says, yes, Joe, that is indeed what I sound like. I'm Joe's doubling down. Whoa, why'd you write that? But anyway, he said, Cody, I'm curious. So ever since I reclaimed my tower from snakes and bouncing balls and other
I remember
villainous
those
things, I now have a thirst for justice.
Wow. Cubert,
How can you help
there's
me
therapy
out,
for
Cody?
that, my dude.
Yeah, well, no, because he has to keep his city safe.
Oh, well.
He said that. He's saying this all in the science.
I've got just the distraction for you.
Ooh, I'm curious too, Cody.
Yeah, so I'm in the video game section. I've been talking about open world games or games that kind of fit that mold. Some of them are a bit edge case, but I think these count.
Okay.
I think I've done a pretty good job at. Anyways, not important.
I would agree
What
with
is
you.
important is today I'm going to talk about Batman, Arkham Asylum, and Arkham City, the two Batman games that I did play from Rocksteady Studios and Warner Brothers Interactive. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and it actually took me a second to realize that these games came out in 2009. Or at least the first one did. It came out in 2009, and then every other year after that, for 4 games, the Batman games came out. And if you're following along with the season, this game is what I would argue is probably the precursor to the ideas that were used for the Spider-Man game that just came out.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, a lot of the same stuff. It's a action-adventure game where you play as Batman, and at least in the first one, Arkham Asylum, he is putting away the Joker again.
Okay.
And Joker has this ridiculous, convoluted, very Joker-style plan that gets Batman locked up in Arkham Asylum with basically every Batman villain in there trying to kill him. Oops.
Oh, uh-oh.
Yeah, and I actually really enjoyed these first 2 games. You basically go around in Arkham Asylum and find, you basically, I think Joker is planning to blow up Asylum, if memory serves.
Isn't he trying to let him out? What?
Well, he's trying.
No.
He's got a plan to get himself out, but one of the things he's also trying to do is, I'm sorry, it wasn't Asylum. He's got bombs around Gotham City, and so Batman's kind of on this timer to get out of Asylum so that he can basically stop these bombs from going off.
Okay, yeah.
So he has to go around. There's a lot of neat stealth areas and kind of these silly detective moments where you have to go around and figure out what happened in a room so that you can move forward, and you get all the cool bat gadgets like the Batarang and the hook shot that he has.
Yeah.
And he's got something where he draws a little bat on the wall and it blows up it's C4.
That was my favorite one.
Yeah.
I've actually played these games.
Yeah. And so while I really enjoyed them, and I feel for the fact that Arkham Asylum is kind of a contained idea, you're just in Arkham Asylum, this game is so big and there were so many different wings and layers and all these different nooks and crannies in Arkham Asylum. It really did feel like you were exploring a world.
Yeah.
It had that openness that open world games tend to have, and lots of secret collectibles, the Joker chattering teeth that you could break to, it was very much a gamey collectible.
The Riddler trophies.
but and a lot of the bosses were really cool too. I wanted to talk about this game because it was so close to being perfect for me.
Where does it fall short?
It falls short right at the fucking end, my dude. So this is going to be huge spoilers for Arkham Asylum. I did not like the leading up to the end of Asylum.
Interesting.
So like the idea, so basically you're trying to get to Joker. Joker's always like a step ahead of you, and finally Batman's making progress. And he's like getting to where Joker's hiding out, and he finally gets to him, and it ends up being this weird, like, Bane-style fight where he becomes, like, a hulking brute, and you have to, like, fight him like that. Like he's just, like, you know, it's like, imagine the Hulk, but with Joker face paint on.
Yeah.
And
smash.
And yeah, and he smashed, and it felt very un-Joker. In my head, in my head canon of what is like a good Joker fight, it felt so like it took me out of like, oh, I'm playing a Batman game to, oh, that's right, this is a video game.
Yeah,
like it felt very much like
boss.
Yeah, and so, and the reason I bring up that I'm going to be talking about Asylum and City, which is the sequel to this game.
Sure.
City did exactly what I wanted in a Joker fight for the final boss, because surprise, he's the main protagonist or antagonist, right?
Joker again?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the fight in Arkham City was so much more in line with how Joker would have fought or would have tried to fight Batman.
Okay.
Which was, I guess this is spoilers for Arkham City as well.
Spoilers just everywhere.
Yeah, spoilers all around. You don't actually fight Joker in Arkham City. Like, you find him, and he totally pulls the body double thing, where he makes somebody, like, into the Joker, and
sure.
One of your allies, kills them. And kills the body double, and Batman's like,
no, why'd you do that? That's stupid, because I don't like killing people. Yeah, I have a moral code. Yeah, I've got a moral compass that I'll not cross. Unless I'm being written by Frank Miller.
Yeah, well, good thing, right? And so...
This is good Batman voices, by the way.
Right. And so so your ally at the time kills the body double, and then Batman kind of realizes, like, oh shit, this isn't the right one. Like, it's that weird, like, he figures it out at the last second, hears a gunshot, and then his allies just fucking iced.
Oh no.
And then you go, you run to, like, fight him or whatever, and then you find out that the body double is actually Clayface.
Oh, interesting.
And so you fight Clayface in, like, this kind of big monster form almost. And to me, that was like, this is a really cool final fight. Because Joker's not like some beefy Hulk that kind of takes me out of like how I imagine Joker to be.
Sure.
And like even after the end of that, like there's like a nice little cinematic, and I don't really, unless granted my Batman vernacular and my ideas are very limited. I haven't read a bunch of the comics or anything like that. Like most of my stuff is on movies and games and the cartoons from when I was younger. But he always seemed like, one step ahead. He's crazy and he's sly. Like, he wouldn't, like... I think he would never take on Batman in a frontal combat scenario. Like, he'd have, like, a trick up his sleeve or some kind of way out.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea of that fight being anything but either, like, something super tricky, like, not your usual fight, or something else entirely is like what I imagine a Joker fight to be.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from.
And it was cool because like you fight Clayface and you beat him, and it's actually more just a cutscene where the general idea is spoilers for the game, Joker is suffering from some kind of illness.
Isn't he dying?
Yeah, he's dying in Asylum, and he gives the whatever this viral contagion is or whatever, he gives it to Batman, and it forces Batman to be like, you need to find the cure or you're gonna die. And then Batman, because of his moral compass, is like, well, I can't just let him die. He's got to go to prison and atone for his crimes or whatever.
He has to go to that asylum that he continually breaks out of that I still send people to for some reason.
So with City, I really liked the final boss. Like, I felt like characters were in line with how they should act, at least from what I can remember. Mm-hmm. My only beef with Arkham City, actually, is Arkham Asylum felt very contained and everything was, like, in its place. There was lots of cool collectibles. There was all sorts of, like, things to do. And it felt like everything had its place and everything, like, nooks and crannies everywhere to explore. Super fun. But Arkham City felt, and this is, I feel like, as I've been playing these open world games, this seems to be a common issue with a lot of earlier style open world games, is big, giant, because, like, Arkham City is basically a big chunk of, or not a big chunk, but a chunk of Gotham that has basically been turned into a prison.
Yeah.
At least in the games. I don't know how true that is to the comics or anything like that. But
isn't it,
you have this big chunk of Gotham City, and it's so, like, after, like, the first couple of hours of, like, zipping around and, like, going from rooftop to rooftop fighting bad dudes, it's like huge place, but, like, I don't care about half the shit in it. And the Riddler trophies, at least in the second game, drove me crazy. Like, they were not fun. Like, at a certain point, I gave up on the idea of 100%ing it because, oh god, it was obnoxious. Traveling from place to place felt very tedious at a certain point, whereas with, at least in Arkham Asylum, I didn't feel that way. Like,
yeah,
it was
everything
nice
was, like,
and contained.
Yeah, everything was, like, close quarters. Correct me if I'm wrong, too. Wasn't it possible to be locked out of places where there might be Riddler trophies?
Yeah, there were certain areas that you needed certain gadgets, and a lot of it was... And, like, sometimes you had to get really crafty with how you use those gadgets.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there was just a lot. And I liked where City was going with a lot of the different, like, side villains that aren't, like, a part of the story, but they happen to be there, and you, like, interact with them. But they end up feeling like, I liked the interactions with those characters, but then I was like, I'm really tired of, like, the Riddler has found a way to fuck me over by doing mini games. Like, it feels very like, I don't know, it's City falls for me because there was just too much to do, and it wasn't fun the whole way through. Like, the main stuff, oh, I loved it. Because it reminds me of Asylum. Like, because there's, like, those stealth elements, because you're Batman, like, you can sneak around and you can, like, before you get into a big fight, you can, like attack people, like in the movies where, like, you attack one at a time and they, like, get pulled up and they're like, whoa! And everyone's like, where the fuck's the Batman? And you could go entire areas without combat by just, like, sneaking around and, like, taking people out. And that was super cool, and it felt very Batman. And then I get to City, and a lot of it was, like, you couldn't quite, especially in the open areas, it was very hard to sneak around. Like, you just had to fight. And, I don't know, it lessened the experience for me.
Interesting. I will say that
I'm sorry, I'm gonna interrupt. It makes it sound like I don't appreciate these games. These games are fun, and there's 4 of them, so, like, if this sounds like your jam, you're gonna be in for a wild ride.
Yeah.
But with I don't know, it could have been, like, an A+ game. It just isn't, you know?
Yeah, no. I see where you're coming from, especially with, like, the Joker thing, because, like, one of the things about the Joker is he's not a very physical villain. So, and like, you know, there's other ways around it too. So like Scarecrow can get kind of, you know, fun in that, like, you can mess around with him, right? You know?
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Like, he's scaring you or things like that. But yeah, I know Joker's kind of a weird villain unless he's just like masterminding. Now, I will say this: it does have one of my favorite Batman moments in all of Batman-dom, which is like he gets connection to Oracle, and he's like,
"All right, Oracle, I need you."
Wait a second.
Oracle, I need you to plug in like these coordinates and send it to my detective vision.
She's like, all right, what are these coordinates? He's like,
well, I built a bat cave underneath Arkham Asylum.
She's like, you built a bat cave underneath? He's like,
yeah, I built it on the off chance that one day the Joker would, you know, like do a thing where I'd have to escape from Arkham Asylum, or like I was trapped in Arkham Asylum, so I like built it just in case.
And she's like, that's crazy. He's like,
I'm Batman.
And like, that's me peak Batman right there, you know? Like, dude is so crazy that he built a contingency Batcave that he never intended on using, unless on the off chance that the Joker trapped him on Arkham Asylum. But
yeah.
But anyways,
well, yeah, and I really loved in Arkham Asylum that the bosses, like besides the end, most of the boss fights were thematic.
Yeah.
Because, like, one of the things was, spoilers, I guess. Spoilers. You fight Mr. Freeze in Arkham Asylum. Yeah. And he's not a dumb dude. Like, he's intelligent. He's just also a little crazy.
Sure.
And in his fight, you can't do the same thing over and over again. Like, if you try to continue to do the same attack pattern, he's like, nope, I've figured out a defense mechanism for that. You can't do that anymore. Yep. So you had to really get creative with how you defeated him. Like, you had to use all your tools. Like, at that point, there wasn't a whole lot you could do. Because, like, I think you had to hit him with, like, explosives. Like, it had to be explosive damage because he's wearing, like, the super suit.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, it was just super cool. And I loved the croc scene where, like, you have to, like, sneak through the sewers. And you had to be super careful with where you were going and, like, you know, it was like this almost like Jaws-like moment where he's like in the water and you're like, fuck, I gotta go.
The Killer Croc battle was so good, so scary.
Yeah, like it was so good. And then I feel like right at the end they were just like, well, this is a video game. Womp womp.
I do remember that, like, you couldn't actually physically fight him. Like, you had to, like, pull towers on him. But still, I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, it just felt very brute-ish. Which is so unlike Joker from what I've seen.
Sure. That
it was just kind of like, okay. Like, I would have been okay with that if you were fighting Bane. You know? Like, that makes sense for Bane. Or at least cartoon Bane. I don't know. I guess it depends on what movie you're watching. Because sometimes he's just kind of like, I'm just like a big old meathead. And then sometimes he's like, got a silly voice and like some kind of weird mastermind, sort of.
Bane's actually supposed to be very smart in the comics.
Okay. I think that's what I thought, but like at least like the Batman cartoons, he doesn't feel like a very smart dude. Or the movie with Poison Ivy.
Well, we don't talk about that movie. So anyway, middle section?
Yeah, the middle section.
Middle section. Middle section. Middle section. All right, that's it.
I was trying to give you some Batman vibes.
Sweet.
To sing. So hopefully it'll either have turned out really well or really poorly. Guys, this is the middle section where we tell you about all the things to get at us on.
Yeah.
If you want in on this conversation or you want to tweet at us, feel free at fandomr_podcast. That's where we usually do our announcements for, you know, extra special moments, like when we need to move the podcast around, or maybe if we got a double feature going on, if we got more time to record.
Yeah.
So that's where you can find information about us. You can also send us personal questions that we can answer on the podcast for you at fanroulettepodcast@gmail.com. We usually leave areas in the episode, or we usually leave them in the season for questions and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure.
So, on a lot of our earlier episodes in season 0, which was like our first year of doing this, were a lot of questions from fledgling DMs.
Yeah.
You can also find us at www.fandomroulette.com, where all of our bio stuff is, if you want to learn a little more about us, or if you want to get a hold of our episodes. They're all loaded up there.
Yep.
And at the very bottom, you can submit questions and things to us, and we can see them.
Yes.
We are also on iTunes and SoundCloud.
Please.
So please do the rating and the liking, subscribing, putting us up there on the what do you even call it? The leaderboards?
Yeah, I mean, like, let's go with that.
Putting us up there. And any help from the audience is greatly appreciated. This is a passion project, and we want to keep pushing forward with our little bits.
Yeah, for sure.
We're also on social media too.
Oh yeah, we are.
We're on Facebook. We're on Tumblr. We are on Instagram at Fandom Roulette. So that's where you can find us. Lots of silly pictures, silly goofs, etc.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you guys so much for listening. We appreciate it. Like Cody said, this is a passion project, and without you guys, this isn't quite anywhere near as fun. Also, please feel free to send us Monster or Garbage Kid fan fiction, because I promise you I'll read it on the air. I promise.
Yes, he promises.
Yeah.
So, that's the middle section for us.
That was the middle section where you learned about social media. Bop.
Nice. I like that.
Yeah, I know, right? Gotta end with a bop, or else people won't know, like, what to do with your life. Yeah,
well, man, I'm really looking forward to talking about world building and magic and all that. Too. But do you, do you smell that?
No, I have a little bit of allergies going on right now.
Oh, that's good, because this smells like week old beans and cabbage. Ugh.
Ooh, that doesn't sound like fun.
No,
those are bad smells.
Guys, this is the Garbage Kid section. The section y'all look forward to every week.
I mean, I certainly do.
Our team of writers come up with the greatest names and the greatest backstories, which we roll up through an amazing book called Xanathar's Guide to Everything. And I know what you're thinking.
Whoa. What am I thinking,
Everything?
Cody?
Yeah.
That was what I was thinking. Wow.
I know, right? You were thinking everything, and I have to say, basically everything.
Basically everything. Like, they're still like writing books, but like, hey man, you gotta eat.
Yeah, from a marketing standpoint, if they have literally everything in the book, they can't make any more. So
exactly,
everything that you need. So if you like, we make these characters for the audience. So if you're ever running a one shot and you want a silly character that we've come up with, or you're writing, maybe you're writing an NPC and you have no idea who to put in, feel free to use these Garbage Kids. These are our precious little babies. And this week, it's a good one.
Okay.
We got Arcana Dream Lion, the half-elf ranger.
Oh, man. That's
so
nice.
good. I had a winner with this one.
All right, I'm excited.
Arcana knew who their parents were and was born at home.
Okay, good start.
Arcana has a single younger sibling.
Oh, good. That's nice.
Arcana grew up in a poor orphanage, working out of a small home because their parents disappeared to an unknown fate.
Oh, well, there we go. That got a little bit darker immediately.
Arcana had several friends, and their childhood was generally a happy one.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Arcana found purpose while they honed their hunting skills, bringing down dangerous animals at the edge of civilization.
Okay.
Arcana thought that towns and cities were a necessary evil. But once the wilderness is purged of all supernatural threats, we will need them no more.
Wow, okay.
Arcana's homeland was among the peaks of a mountain. Finding the best path through the mountains is second nature to them.
That's pretty cool.
Arcana does not bear enmity toward their foe. They stalk such creatures as a hunter tracks down a wild animal. Arcana is 45 years old.
Good.
And has had 3 life experiences leading up to this very moment.
Alright. That's an acceptable number of life experiences.
First, Arcana suffered a great tragedy. War ravaged their home community, reducing everything to rubble and ruin.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Arcana would then fall in love.
Aww.
And then finally, Arcana would have a supernatural experience.
Ooh.
They escaped certain death and believe it was the intervention of a god that had saved them.
Very nice.
And that is Arcana Dreamlion.
I like it. All right.
So,
time to go to our very scientific.
Yeah, our very scientific, patent pending rating system.
Okay. So you ready for my answer, Cody?
Yes.
I'm going to say no, but they really want to, but they can't because it's located in a ding-dang city.
You know what? See, that's where we differ. I think
there ain't no Hot Topic malls in the forest.
You know, that's where I beg to differ. I think if you look hard enough in every forest, there is a single Hot Topic.
It just pops up. It's like
you're just like walking through. You're by a babbling brook, and then all of a sudden, welcome to Hot Topic, and you hear like 2008 like emo music playing in the background with like a pile of Funko Pop figures.
I was hoping you were gonna have to pull some contemporary emo band. I was getting so jazzed. I was like,
I can't think of that.
Yeah, because we're old men. We're not hip on the music.
Oh man, no, we're not. Or I'm not, anyways. No, I definitely think that they frequent Hot Topic.
So you think that they found like some magical like forest room of requirement Hot Topic in the middle of the woods?
Yeah, I'm gonna Dryads run the Hot Topic, and you should listen to Dryad emo music. It is supreme.
I don't know, man. It sounds a little wooden to me, but yeah, I'm going to contend that they only exist in the cities and that.
Well, to be fair,
doesn't go to
it's a necessary evil to have cities because Hot Topics exist.
Yeah, but so is the real villain that we have to destroy all the Hot Topics for them to go away?
I think we've been the villains all along.
I mean, that's fair. we do roll these children every week.
And you know what? We had differing opinions on this one, and it didn't take a lawful good warlock to do it.
Man, I can't wait.
I'm proud of us.
I can't wait for that day. I can't wait for that just weird.
I know. Anyway. As soon as I roll up a warlock, it'll be the first time that I roll alignment because I don't usually play with alignment. So
anyway,
moving on from the smelly garbage, let's like throw that away. Plump. I don't know what that was. I think I threw it on a bouncy castle, maybe? Who knows?
Oh no! What are you doing with the bouncy castle in your recording space?
Hey, sometimes after a recording, I need to bounce around.
You gotta bounce it out. I feel it.
Yeah, sometimes I gotta bounce.
Sometimes you just
so, guys, the moment you've all been waiting for. I think our last, like, meaty section of the world building, besides of what we have planned for the last episode.
The media section.
Yeah. We're going to talk about magic today.
What?
Yeah, I'm super excited. Magic's kind of like my favorite bit about fantasy stuff. I always love magic.
So, would you like to kick it off then, given that little disclaimer?
Yeah. So we've been doing a whole thing on world building, and you're going to notice some crossover, and I'm sure you'll... Yeah, there's going to be crossover, because all this stuff is kind of intertwined if you want a a unique or believable fantasy world that kind of checks with with people's palates. So the questions that I thought about when I was building mine and building one for this, for our little thing.
Sure.
Big one. And I feel like it's the one that sprouts the most questions. And this is the one that you have to kind of figure out right away. How does it work? Mm-hmm. How does magic work?
Yeah.
What are the rules? I think I think the first and foremost, if you're doing this for an RPG, like a role-playing game, you can just use what's in the source material for whatever game you plan on playing in. Or maybe that's a deciding factor for how, what game you play is magic and how that's worked. D&D has like, an entire history of how magic works. There's all sorts of gaming systems out there that have different
systems.
Right. So for your game, how does it work? Do you plan to just take what's in, your source book for whatever game you're playing? If it's not, or maybe you're tweaking it a little.
Sure.
I would argue that you probably want to keep it simple enough.
Yeah.
You want it to be consistent across the boards.
Okay. I understand what you're saying.
And then the limits to what magic can do, if there are any. I feel like you should at some point, or otherwise there's no... I feel like there's no
balance,
edge.
Oh. Yeah.
Or
those are two ways
edge
to say that.
or tension. Like there's a certain level of what magic can do, and I feel like if you don't set limits on what you're allowed to do, it can create frustrating experiences.
I agree with that.
And then when you're thinking about this, when you're playing your game or you're writing your story, make sure you stick with these rules.
Sure. And
if you don't, there definitely needs to be a pretty good reason why, and probably should be explained either through your game and through your storytelling, or, at least so that the audience knows that, like, hey, there are some rules you can break, but they're like special circumstances.
For sure.
Another part to how does it work? The source of magic. Are there multiple sources? Do they come from items, or do they come from deities? Do they come from, a resource that exists in your universe?
Mm-hmm. Is it just the raw primal energy that exists in the world?
Right. Where does that magic come from? And it doesn't have to be, and that's what I love about magic. It doesn't have to just come from one place.
Exactly.
In D&D, there are several different ways. There are several different sources of magic and where it comes from. And then one of my final bits for how does it work? Who can use magic?
Mm-hmm.
Is it something you're born with? Is it something you study for? Do you bargain for it? I know in Dungeons and Dragons, in my example, all three exist. You can be born with it, you can study, and you can also decide to, fuck it. Everyone's, you have to be born with it in order to use magic, or maybe you have to study. There aren't, sorcerers or these people who are just pre-built with, crazy magic inside them.
Sure.
It would actually, I think it would be interesting to do a game where it's like there are supernatural like people or creatures that have lived outside of the world, and everything in your world is mundane, and they have to bargain for magic. Like everyone's a warlock in D&D terms.
That'd be interesting.
So yeah, you play with it, tweak it. You don't have to stick to just the source material.
Sure.
You can always tweak it around. Another big question that I feel like sprouts more questions and kind of gets magic a little more entwined is, how does the world view magic?
Mm-hmm.
Just the general idea. I usually think of like, what's the broad view? Like, what is just kind of like, if someone were to bring up in any situation magic, what is the most likely outcome of that conversation?
Mm-hmm.
And then, go down further, like, how do organizations feel about it? Are there organizations that are trying to rid magic of from the world, or, quite the opposite? And then, like, things like kingdoms and things like that, like sprinkling in, like, how do they view magic? Do they love it? Do they hate it? Do they even know it exists? Like, those are questions you want to ask yourself when you're bringing magic into this. And then, I've been beating you over the head since the beginning.
What?
How does it fit into your world and theme? And how does society live with it? How drastically does magic change their lives? I think if you're, and this is the great part, you could do a whole fantasy world without magic. Like, that is a choice. Yeah. You can do all sorts of things. I mean, you can tweak and mess with magic whichever way you want. And I feel like it should fit your theme, at least in some fashion. If one of your ideas is you wanted to do, and part of the questions we asked in the theme is like, how does magic fit into your world? Is it low magic where only certain people can have it? Like, this is where you start to think about those concepts.
Yeah.
And those were like the kind of the big picture questions that usually kind of sprout more questions and more until you get it to a finely sharpened blade.
Yes. Ooh, nice metaphor.
I know, right? Do you have any extra thoughts about what you should consider in...
Yeah, I would throw out a couple of things, which is, you always talk about advocating for a session 0, or even a pre-planning session, via like it's so easy to organize Dungeons and Dragons parties nowadays.
Right.
With like Facebook and things like that. Like, you can create a private, like a secret group with just your campaign members, things like that. Always be willing to like let your character play whatever they want to play. So even if you're not necessarily thinking of a world where like magic is like a latent thing, and like you were kind of hoping for no sorcerers, if someone was like, "Oh, I was really hoping to play a sorcerer," figure out how to make it work, even if it's like, oh my god, like this is like this anomaly and like everyone's fascinated by it, or things like that, like, don't limit magic in such a way that it limits a player being what they want to be.
Sure. Yeah, I can agree with that.
And then another thing is, I've been trying to remember it all day, and you might actually know, I don't remember, but there was a really interesting campaign set up for 4th edition, which was like a republishing of an original, which was basically like this world that was like a gigantic desert, and there were like sand ships, and they established a couple of new races, like these bugmen with 4 arms, and like these like dwarven human, like a mixed race of dwarf and human, which like they were like incredibly strong, and so like they were often used for like labor and things. But one of the things I remember being really interesting about it was there was magic, but the magic was very dangerous.
So I believe you were talking about the Dark Sun campaign.
I am talking about Dark Sun. I was trying to think. I was like, I know it's not Sunless Citadel.
No, that's an actual dungeon. Within the D&D lore. But the Dark Sun campaign. I'm really hoping for some kind of that they put like official source material out for running a campaign like that. Would be so good.
I just remember thinking the concept of like having magic, but having magic be like a high risk, high reward thing being really fascinating.
Yeah.
Which is, once again, not in a way to like limit your players, but just this idea of you have to, prepare. And then I guess another big question too is, and this kind of becomes like a your mileage may vary thing, is like, for instance, like a wizard, like, do they have to be holding a book to cast a spell, right? Or like whatever their book happens to look like. Or, I always thought, with Umgrom, because I took Keen Mind, like, I didn't have to physically be holding onto my spell book, because I would just read it and remember it.
That's fair. I mean, technically, because you were a cleric, you didn't need like a spell book. With the way the mechanics work, you technically gain your spells from your deity. Like,
That's
once
true.
a day. You can just like be like, hey dog, I need this, and this.
You
And
can
they're
switch
like,
it out. But I don't know. I just like the concept of magic users like just reading out of a book. But
yeah, I mean, there's some really cool ideas with that. Like, I love the idea of, I know some people who had maybe a little more intense DMs would like try to tattoo their spells onto their body.
Interesting.
So that they couldn't like lose their spell book because their body was their spell book.
Yeah.
There's actually some cool. If you ever get if for the people out there who are like, oh yeah, magic, definitely go. If you got Xanathar's Guide to Everything, look up the kind of the flavor text and some of the tables for the spellcasters like bards, wizards, sorcerers.
They're really
and
cool.
Look at how they treat magic, because some of them are really cool, especially the wizard. One of the options is they carry around stone tablets.
Yeah.
Which to me is just so wild, like some Moses shit.
My personal favorite is writing it on leather straps that you wrap around a walking stick.
Oh, that's good too.
I don't know what it is about that one that just like really captured my imagination when I was reading it.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, think about things like that. Or how does like, you know, when it comes to other things like magical items, like, do they look like mundane items? Is there always like constantly like a little bit of an aura around them? Would a commoner identify something as a magic item? Like, you know, what are the odds that you bought a thing? You know, because like if you look at for instance, like Aladdin, the lamp looks very mundane, but it's this super powerful item. Whereas if you go to other things like Rares of the Lost Ark, there's like a physical glow around the Ark, and the Ark's so powerful that it can like burn off like the Nazi symbol on the chest that it's carrying, things like that. So like, you know, how do magical items work? What are the limitations of a magical item? Like, is it something where, you know, you have a number of charges per day, which is something to recommend. And I think last but certainly not least, one of the interesting things that Cody, you were saying, and this was something interesting at the start of our campaign with the 6, was a lot of our magic users kind of had to keep their magic use like limited. So like, yep. For instance, we weren't just blasting spells in the middle of cities. Like the most often we were using our spells was when there were few people around us.
Yeah, in our campaign, the first, I would say,
year or so.
Yeah, first year or so, it was a very big continuity with a couple different groups in it. But there was this idea that magic had been heavily restricted to basically people who were studying under the watchful eye of the government. So people who were spellcasters either needed to be part of, you know, a very bureaucratic wizarding school, or some kind of faction that the schools were, or the government was okay with. And so everyone kind of was like, nah, let's see how this goes. And so you guys were technically for a little while like magic convicts, if you will.
Oh yeah. Well,
it was very cool. Man. I liked it, but
I was also a convict.
As things kept going, and it no longer. I had thoughts about it, and you know, maybe in another episode I can talk about why I changed it. But I ended up, somebody was actively trying to remove the effect, and then over the course of a year or so, they finally succeeded.
Yeah, it wasn't even necessarily like. Now that it was gone, like, people could go into the middle of the street and, you know, blast off magic. Like, that could still scare common people, but it was no longer like the guards were going to chase you.
Right. So I figure let's do you want to talk a little bit about the magic system you got going on in your campaign, and I'll talk about mine?
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. Yeah. There was a couple aspects of things, which is, you know, there's basically like the crudest breakdown. You got divine magic and arcane magic, right?
Yeah.
Is there one other? Oh, nature magic, right?
Which it's technically kind of like considered
divine.
Along with like cleric and paladin and ranger magic, but it gets a little nebulous on what that exactly means.
Sure. So in my world, divine magic has not been messed with. I've thought of these people as, it's not a theocracy or anything like that, but like they're pretty pious. So they're not super messing, but if you remember from one of my earlier episodes, at one point there was a mages college in the capital that was shut down by the one lord's father because he was afraid that it was gaining too much power. But there's some secret aspects about that as well. So things like wizards and sorcerers are a little bit more on the DL. And bards, although they're arcane casters, don't have the same restrictions placed on them as other ones, because bards have been able to use their magics to prove that they're not necessarily actively threats, even though in a lot of cases they might be. But they've successfully proven themselves that they weren't actively threatening. So wizards and sorcerers are kind of on the DL. They're not necessarily in hiding. And then the capital does have a small band of trained mages. So if you are discovered to be an arcane caster, you have the option to work with the government or be imprisoned. So,
damn, that's rough.
Yeah. I kind of took a little bit of cues from yours, but I didn't want to necessarily get rid of all magic, so I was like, divine casters are cool.
Yeah, I get that.
So anyway, and I'm going to assume yours is like dark and cool and shit.
Kind of. Yeah, so from a couple of conversations we've had about Lundar and this general kind of dark overtone, there was a cataclysm. And clerical divine magic, the stuff that clerics and paladins could cast, suddenly vanished. And along with that, some terrible plagues began to rise because society had basically heavily relied on divine magic for so long that they didn't know how to function without it. So, after kind of a great cataclysm, magic is perceived by most, hashtag not all, but most people as kind of it's kind of a double-edged sword. Most people don't want to heavily rely on it, although they're not openly against magic.
Interesting.
So like a lot like wizard schools and like big temples that practice these kinds of magics don't really exist anymore. There's not like a very typical way to learn it unless you go through some unsavory methods. The most common one, however, which is accepted and in fact a little feared, is that of the new divine magic that is sprouted from the demigods. So warlocks and clerics from these particular demigods are almost super important people, and depending on which demigod you happen to be living under, could be a good thing or could be a terribly bad thing. So warlocks aren't actually very feared, and there's not like a misconception like it kind of implies in the D&D universe. Most schools and organizations no longer exist, or if they do, they're in like seclusion or hiding because the outside world doesn't want to give that a chance. For this, I've tweaked a couple of things, but it's all based on the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition magic system. The only big difference is that paladins and clerics are kind of cut closer to the same cloth. All their magic comes from the gods. Whereas rangers and druids are a little different. While they're still classified as quote-unquote divine magic, they come from different sources. The earth is magical in its own right, and so druids and rangers can pull from the natural magics, whereas clerics and paladins, they actually pull from deities who have given them power.
Very cool.
So yeah, it's still on theme if you know the demigods and stuff like that, because not every demigod is this, like, pious, like, lawful good being. Sometimes they are just people looking to get rich off of the powers that they've been given. So some areas, being a cleric of a demigod of, like a rotten area is terrifying, because now they have super crazy magic. I think this era of Lundar has gone back quite considerably. So, like, there's a lot of ruins of the old empire where there's, like, cool magic things, and, like, an empire of, like, I would say industrial renaissance, like, style setting. But everything got pushed back after the calamity because a lot of people who knew how to work these things no longer are living.
Sure.
So magic has also taken a step back. There aren't wizards performing, tricks on the street corner for people to enjoy. To have a wizard come into a town, a lot of people kind of give a weary eye and try to deal with them the least amount as possible without being, super rude about it.
Yeah, that makes sense given what I've heard about this world.
Definitely scaled back, definitely kind of dark and moody, which is kind of the theme that I'm going for.
Yeah, I love it.
So yeah, that is Lundar.
Yeah, and of course mine is more along your lines of a more traditional fantasy setting.
Yeah.
Oh, one other thing. I do intend that there be a certain level of training involved with magic, and if not, then if you're haven't had a certain level of training, no matter what your class, you have to roll on a wild magic table. So.
Oh shit! I like it.
Yeah.
Very
cool. Anyway, thank you guys so much for listening to yet another episode of Fandom Roulette.
Yeah,
this has been a pleasure to record for you, and we thank you so much for listening. Please go back to the middle section to find out about our social media and things like that. We'd love to have you involved for the ride. It's always a pleasure. So, any final thoughts, Cody?
No, just thanks everyone for listening to the podcast. We greatly appreciate it. Go back to the middle section. Help us out on our journey through this crazy thing that we call Fandom Roulette, and we will see you next time.
Yeah, and as always, from Fandom Roulette, this is Joe.
And I'm Cody.
And as always, stay nerdy.
Stay super.